All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
What up, everybody? Welcome. Oh, I love Wednesdays. I love Wednesdays. This is a great day to be here. Got an author pulling through. In fact, I guess you could consider Rothmann an author, too. He's written quite a tome.
Yes, he has.
And he'll be joining us. But I met an author in addition to the author who's normally here. The General and Julia. It's about Ulysses S. Grant. It's kind of a love story that deals, it's a historical novel that deals with Ulysses S. Grant and a woman who he becomes involved with. So we'll talk to the author who's going to be through in the second hour. First of all, you don't get conversations about Ulysses S. Grant much anymore, so there'll be it's a throwback. I call it a throwback. Kim is here, and that was by no means clear that she was going to join us today.
Kim, how are you?
Yeah. She was the victim of a power outage. You know, it's raining in much of the San Francisco Bay Area where Kim is. And maybe it was related to that. I don't know. But I need my Kim.
Kim, how are you?
So I'm glad she's here. Yeah.
Especially since we have no producer, so then you would have been flying solo, and trust me, that's not fun.
Well, I don't even need to trust you on that. I was dreading it. My whole attitude all morning was, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, because I don't do a show where I now will, and I have to learn how to do this, clearly. The new year is going to bring another challenge to me, which is to create certain support systems in the show that aren't there now. Now, we really work pretty threadbare, as you know, and the audience is so great to support us, and that allows us to operate in the first place, of course. But I need to learn how to, run some of these video things that Kim, I put my glasses on for a moment to recognize first into the Super Sticker Forum, Winthrop, big shout out.
Big shout out.
Thank you for a super sticker today. Cheers. And the Mark Thompson merch site is open.
Delette's in Belgium. Hello from Belgium.
Hey, shout out to Belgium.
Yeah. She drove from Germany to Belgium by herself. I think that's a big thing. I did that too, but I had people with me.
Well, what you ought to do is slide over there to The Hague, to the to the World Court. Why not? They're probably pretty busy. That's all I'm saying. Ramp up to Christmas with a lot of they have war crimes and human trafficking accusations, and they're busy at The Hague, is my guess. Isn't The Hague in...
No, it's in the Netherlands.
Google it.
Am I wrong? Well, then you get in the car and you drive to The Hague.
It's not in Belgium. Yeah.
Well, it ought to be in Belgium. Okay,
No,
can I say that? It would be better, and you get more done if it were in Belgium.
Why are you yelling?
I did go to Belgium. I went to a castle. It was a dream. I stayed in a castle, and it was an old hunting lodge of a king in France. And
wow.
He built it and then never went there.
Is that right?
Really, really cool.
And now they turned it into
a bed and breakfast, and they only used 2 floors of it, and it's a little bit run down, and at night very, very creepy. But the downstairs with the dining room and the parlors and everything, it's all the same furniture and the same wall decor and the light sconces that were there,
Ooh.
Candles and everything.
I love original light sconces.
Right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Fireplaces. It's beautiful.
Oh my goodness! What was the occasion that brought you there?
There's a reason that this place is fun.
Right. It's the original light sconces is the reason that it's fun.
That's right.
What was the reason you were there?
It was a milestone birthday, I had never been to Europe before.
I see.
And I was becoming a citizen of Luxembourg. So Luxembourg borders Belgium. So I went to France, Luxembourg, Germany, and Belgium. That's why.
Wow, that sounds
Yeah.
like a great.
And then COVID hit, and I had to come home a week early. But it was great.
Geez, so it was recent then that you went.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm hopeful that you didn't go to the World Court while you were over there.
It's not in Belgium.
Oh.
No, I didn't go to the Netherlands, The Hague. I did not go.
The Hague in the Netherlands. I thought it was in
Yes.
Brussels. Man, I'm really. Is The Hague a? Well, I really am not up on my World Court. I feel like I've got to step up my World Court game.
I think you do a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to play World Court Bingo.
Yeah. World Court headquarters. You guys all would have known that. Everybody in the chat, everybody watching, probably would have.
Mm-hmm.
It's very seldom that I'll run up against something where I just,
I'm pretty sure I got it right? Yeah. It's in the Netherlands. Yeah.
We did the Belgian beer tour last summer, says John Watson.
Whoa, that sounds fun. Better than a castle for sure.
I've been to The Hague, says Dillette. Well,
She doesn't need to go back, so.
sconce is fun to say, says Julie. I agree with that. I think sconces
Sconce.
and sconce may be one of the perfect words in the English language. I agree with that.
Sconce. My mom has a favorite word. She likes the word almond. She likes to say it, almond.
I see that. I mean,
Sconce.
I don't particularly like it, but I see the thinking behind her.
Mm-hmm.
Behind her thinking.
Yes. I agree, Julie. Sconce. I like it.
Yes, ensconced. Sounds so, and the word ensconced. Well, we're
Dingable.
I believe so. Yes. After a year here on the Mark Thompson Show, we're ensconced in our position with the YouTube audience. Please, excuse me. It's the new holiday blend, Coachella Valley Coffee. I'll tell you what I'm doing. I made a little French press this morning.
Okay.
This is just a mini French press.
Oh,
This is
wow.
the holiday blend,
You don't
which
mess
is
around with your coffee
and this is
accoutrement.
no. Well, I have every kind of cough, so I want you to know that you can do this at your home, and you can have the holiday blend, rich, delicious, warm, and wonderful, right there at Coachella Valley Coffee.
How is it holiday-ish? Does it have like a little hint of cinnamon, or what makes it holiday-y?
I'll tell you why it's holiday-ish. It's a very good question.
A little sprig of holly?
There's a little note of love. That's what
Is
it
that
is.
what it is?
Yes, it is. That's right. Note of love, everybody.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Happy
It's got.
Hanukkah, Merry
I
Christmas,
really
Happy
do. Yeah.
Kwanzaa, have some
What-
coffee.
Whatever your jam, man, we got it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, Rothman's here, bottom of the hour. Gonna be fun.
Yeah.
We'll talk about what's happening on Capitol Hill, which is everything it seems but running the country. There is good news today about the economy. I mean, you're going to tell me, and I think you'd be right if you did tell me, hey, Mark, I don't notice this good news about the economy that you talk about. And the reason you don't, probably, is because of things like gas prices and I think grocery prices. I mean, food prices are continuing quite high. But nonetheless, the economy is a good story. And the challenge for Democrats, and certainly the challenge for President Biden, because he's committed to running again, is to tell that story and to maintain that story in some way. It's a weird thing that Biden is seen as doddering or weak or, all these things associated with old age. But the reality is that his administration has been fairly successful. But he'll have to learn how to tell that story in some way other than the way it's being told, because it's really not getting out. There it is, by the way. If you go to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, enter the discount code MarkT for 10% off. Anything on the site. It does not just a holiday blend. Any kind of coffee you want, and that's a boutique coffee place. So the everything is hand roasted. It's funny. I was on KFI radio in Los Angeles yesterday, and the other guy in the studio, and he's going to come on this show. He's a comedian named Orny Adams, and we started. I don't know how he was drinking something out of a Starbucks cup. And he said, my favorite coffee is actually not this Starbucks stuff. It's Coachella. It's Coachella Valley coffee.
That's funny.
I said,
Are you
kidding?
No way.
This is interesting. So we broed down about that for a while. Yeah. I'll get to the insane reality of hate speech and anti-Semitism a little bit later. I don't want to bum anybody out, but it's really a problem. I mean, it's extraordinary how the Jew hating comes out of the woodwork.
You know what I wanted to tell you is I saw this article. You're just talking about President Biden and then this, and it's really kind of fits, is that President Biden came out apparently very strongly against that Donald Trump statement where he had the Nazi-like speech and the whole vermin thing recently. I don't know if you heard that.
No, of course. Yeah, of course it was that. We touched on it yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, so the President Biden said there's a lot of reasons to be against Donald Trump, but he shouldn't be president. He accused Trump of invoking Nazi-like terminology when he called on his opponents. He called them vermin to be rooted out, and he said undocumented immigrants were poisoning the blood of our country. Biden said this echoes the same phrases used in Nazi Germany. So the president is coming out saying this is wrong.
Well, you remember when I was talking to Jim Avila yesterday, I said, I just can't believe that this toxic speech that you hear in a stump speech. I was talking to David K. Johnston, actually. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it was Avila, not important. It has become sort of the coin of the realm of the GOP. It's this, again, it's really just a reboot of what the 2016 campaign was. Yeah. That 2015-2016 campaign of Trump's was an angry guy who was appealing to those who are angry at government, who feel disenfranchised, all of these things that a lot of us do feel, that government doesn't work. I mean, there are all sorts of examples of government not working. But it's because of those people that we have this problem. And then you fill in those with whatever. You can fill it in with a religious group. You can fill it in with an immigration crew, an illegal immigration crew. The othering of parts of America and the gathering of political heft around hate. It's just so odd to see it become mainstreamed like this. It really would be the sort of thing like, go, wow. I mean, he's going to have to own that. But now it's really become his go-to, you'd say open. It would be like a comedian opening with his best bit. That is his best bit. That's Trump's best bit. It's their fault. Witch hunt, their fault. And the board. I was just going to say the border's always been used as an issue. Sorry?
I just can't for the life of me figure out why people are attracted to the ugly.
Well, hate really rules the day. Look at Twitter or look at social media and see what really gets the most clicks. It's, the snarkiness, the anger, that's what gets it. Trying to own the libs. It's really about owning the libs. You have an entire swath of voters in this country that are ready to vote against their own interests just to own the libs. It's crazy. Oh, I don't know what that is. Oh, that's I've got to think that's some window open.
Yeah.
Joe Fong! What up, Joe Fong, with a super sticker?
Big shout out.
Yeah. Thank you for the super sticker, Joe. Appreciate it very much. We are crowdfunded. I almost don't know where to start today. I did want to get into things, and I guess I will. I will bring on John Rothmann, bottom of the hour. So I'm leaving some things, on the table until then. I will speak to what's happened with the Michigan judge essentially doing what the Colorado judge did, which was kick the can down the road on whether or not Donald Trump should be able to appear on the ballot, and kicking it down the road by saying, okay, let Congress decide this. But meantime, I do want to give you an update on your favorite corrupt senator. Anybody? Favorite corrupt senator? I'm not going to give you the answer yet. Think. Let's see. Corrupt. I'm talking about
choices.
Yeah, exactly. Bob Menendez from New Jersey, Democrat, everybody, nonpartisan. This show, try to call it X's and O's, definitely have a bias. But corruption's corruption, kid. And I'm telling you, this guy Menendez, he's lucky he skated on the first charges. Menendez, just to remind you, was the guy who was most recently found with the gold bars and the cash stuffed into the pockets. Remember that whole thing? It's a relationship with Egypt and essentially a bunch of contracts granted illegally, essentially, is the allegation by Menendez to, I believe it's a business that does catering or provides food for Egypt. And that makes it sound a little like like they're catering a bar mitzvah reception or something, but that's not what it's a huge contract. Tammy Murphy, the First Lady of New Jersey, announcing that she's going to challenge Senator Bob Menendez in the Democratic primary. Time to take him on. I mean, why not? He's taking on water. Go for it, kid. Tammy Murphy, married to New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy, joins a Democratic primary field that already includes Andy Kim, who's a congressperson, and real estate lender Kyle Jacey. Also, Congressperson Donald Norcross, whose brother George is both a South Jersey power broker and sort of an enemy of the Murphy family. They're considering a run, too. So it could be a crowded field for the seat currently held by my favorite corrupt Senator Bob Menendez. Tammy Murphy, a former finance professional, she met her husband at the storied Wall Street investment bank Goldman Sachs. They both worked in the late 1980s there. Phil Murphy rose to an executive position. He spent nearly $16.5 million on his first gubernatorial primary campaign in 2017 of his own money. He spent $16.5 million. How much money do you have to spend $16.5 million of that on a gubernatorial primary run? It's one of several advantages that she brings to the Democratic Senate primary. I'm talking about her fortune made there at Goldman. Anyway, that is going to be hotly contested. And I'd be very surprised. Menendez, I think, is so embattled. He's done. But we'll watch this.
The inappropriate, the chutzpah, I guess I'll say, of these people who are accused of taking gold bars found in their home and being foreign agents working with Egypt to say, I'm still going to run. It doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter. I'm still listen, if you're found out, you're found out. Take a step back. Why do you continue to push the envelope? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, because...
Did I make you choke on your coffee there?
Yeah, that's funny. You're found out, dude. It's over. Yeah. You found out. You tried it. It didn't work.
Ooh,
right.
It's a wild idea, but it just might work.
Yeah, just come to the microphone and say, hey, my bad. You got me. I'm done.
You got me. I'm done. Well, at least don't run again. Even if you use the, I didn't do it excuse in court, don't try to dupe the American people by trying to shove yourself back into the office. Please.
Meantime, you've probably heard about this. This is kind of wild. This is GOP on GOP crime. I hate to see it. GOP on GOP violence between Congressperson Tim Burchett and Kevin McCarthy. So Burchett's giving this interview. He's standing in this hallway. Burchett was one of the 8 Republicans who voted to get rid of McCarthy, right? And he's been heavily critical of McCarthy. So he's giving an interview, and McCarthy elbows him in the back.
Allegedly. Right, punch right to the kidney.
He says, I got elbowed in the back, and it kind of caught me off guard because it was a clean shot to the kidneys. I turned back, and there was Kevin. And for a minute, I was kind of, what the heck just happened? And then chased after him, of course. Now he's the type of guy that, when you're a kid, would throw a rock over the fence and run home and hide behind his mama's skirt. Oh, the smack talking begins. Burchett said that he went after the former speaker to confront him about the altercation, but McCarthy, altercation is a ding word, but said McCarthy brushed him off. He added that he raised his voice and that McCarthy responded to him with that high-pitched kind of thing. He looks for any opportunity to put McCarthy down. Of course, as he always does, he just denies it or blames somebody. This is, of course, Burchett talking. Right? He just denies it or blames somebody else or something, and it was just a little heated. But I just backed off because I saw no reason. I wasn't gaining anything from it. Everybody saw it, so it didn't really matter. Yeah. McCarthy says, I didn't shove him or elbow him. It's a tight hallway.
What?
Yeah. All right. Well, you got to say something. There are 435 congressmen, Burchett said. I was one of the 8 that voted against the guy. Right. He says that hallway has plenty of room. You could walk 4 side by side. Anyway, that's the deal. The Tennessee Republican continued to push back on McCarthy's claim into the night. He was on all the talk shows, so, you get it. I mean, it's so low rent. The House is getting to be insanely low rent, but it's not just the House. In the Senate, there were 2 GOPers facing off against each other there, wanting to fight. Did you see that, Kim?
I did see it. I've heard it called, someone said politics is getting coarse. Yeah.
Stand your butt up.
Mm-hmm.
GOP Senator Markwayne Mullin demanded that they have a physical altercation, he and Sean O'Brien. He's a labor union leader. This is in the middle of a Senate committee hearing. The 2 traded ridiculous high school level insults. Mullin's a member of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. He held up printed copies of what? What is this all about? Past tweets that O'Brien had posted that mocked the senator. They were theoretically focused on standing up to corporate greed, but it degenerated into this stuff. Do you have the video? You do, it looks like.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
let's hear it. You have to unmute it, I think. It looks like it's muted. Yeah.
It's like he's self-made. What a clown. Fraud. Always has been, always will be.
This is the tweet that he's reading.
Quit
That's what
the tough guy act in these Senate hearings.
This
You
is
know where to
O'Brien's tweet
find
that he's
me.
reading.
Any place, anytime, cowboy. Sir, this is a time, this is a place. If you want to run your mouth, we can be 2 consenting adults. We can finish it here.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand your butt up.
Oh, hold on.
Big guy.
Oh, stop it.
Is that your solution, every problem?
No, sit down. Sit down. Okay. You're a United States Senator. Sit
Actively.
Oh, okay.
Sit down, please.
All right.
Can I respond? Mr.
Hold it. If
Hold
we
on.
can, no,
This is
I have
what
the
he
mic.
said.
I'm sorry.
This is
Hold
what
it.
he said.
You'll have your time.
Okay.
Can I respond?
Oh, no, you can't. This is a hearing.
This is like a run-through for Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? This is what, yeah. Thanksgiving this year for everybody is going to be like this. Take a note. Yeah. At my Thanksgiving, I put all the Republicans on one side, all the Democrats on the other side. And I put all the independents at a separate table. And then I leave seats open on each side. And I go, if any of the arguments that begin today are particularly persuasive to you, you independents can move from the independent table to the Republican side or the Democratic side. That's how our Thanksgiving is set up. But man, this is the lunacy that has crept into the legislative process. It's utterly, I think, ridiculously about ego and machismo and all that. And by the way, it's not just men. Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene are examples of that same, machismo and ego you associate, I think, with men a lot of the time. That I think wars can be fought over it, right? But women have, sadly, the same thing. And
that senator who was standing up, challenging the person to a fight, that was Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, a Republican from Oklahoma, who yesterday was on a podcast and said, "I'm not afraid of biting." He said, "I'll bite 100%. I'm in a fight. I'm going to bite. I'll do anything. I'm not above it. And I don't care where I bite, by the way. I'll bite ya."
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty scary.
Can you let him finish, sir?
No, I think it's pretty wild. Aggression seems to be the way of the world there. Kim's news and then the great John Rothmann. Yeah, I'd like to talk about this polling, which is to be increasingly ignored, it's suggested. I'd also like to talk about the economy, which is, it seems, I'd suggest, seemingly ignored a lot of good economic news. Probably, to be perfectly frank, which I like to be perfectly frank, that's a good name for a podcast, Perfectly Frank.
Perfectly
Is there,
Frank, yeah.
Is there one? There's got to be one that's already called
Especially if
Perfectly.
your name was Frank. I mean,
Yeah, well, that would be...
because then it'd be like this whole, play on words,
Oh, no, you don't want it unless your name is Frank. No, that's absolutely right. But somebody named Frank has a podcast called Perfectly Frank. Check it out. I'm sure it's true. But anyway, what was I saying again?
I don't remember. It's over.
Kim, do you listen to anything I say on the show or not really?
I often do. Perfectly Frank, right?
Often or all the time? Oh, yeah, you heard Perfectly Frank. Very well done.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyway. All right. Rothmann's ahead. Kim's news. It's a great day. We've got a great author in who's got a really cool book. I mentioned it's about Ulysses S. Grant. It's called The General and Julia. That'll be in the second hour. Smash the like button if you possibly
with your
can.
Iron rod.
Costs you nothing to hit the like button, and I appreciate it. Smash it
with your
Smash it
iron
like
rod.
a boss, damn it. Do it like you mean it. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. Here's my little news graphic. Look at that. Yes, well, let's start with the Israeli military raiding the Gaza Strip's main hospital. They say it's a targeted operation against Hamas. The U.S. confirming yesterday that Hamas uses hospitals and tunnels underneath them to hide and hold hostages. Of course, Hamas disagrees. The United States says that is something confirmed, but a lot of discrepancies there. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin says he is open to a presidential run, the Democrat announcing last week he will not seek re-election, possibly throwing the balance of power in the Senate up for grabs. Manchin telling NBC News he wants to unite the center of the country. Hunter Biden looking to subpoena former President Trump and former Attorney General Bill Barr in his criminal gun case. The president's son looking to Trump and former Justice Department officials for information in his defense that this is a vindictive or selective prosecution. That violates Hunter Biden's Fifth Amendment rights. Hunter Biden pleading not guilty to charges of lying on federal firearms forms and illegally possessing a weapon while using illicit drugs.
How bummed are you if you're Joe Biden that this, this Hunter thing, there's no wrapping it up.
No.
It's just, honestly, I think most people don't care about it. But on the other hand, on the right and on the right-wing media channels, be them literal, broadcast channels or even, across the right-wing media on the web, it's just Hunter Biden all the time. And I just think if you're Joe Biden, you just
because that's all they have. That's all they can point at, right?
Well, that's not all they can point at. They can point at you can talk issues, but that's just not what.
The issues aren't ugly enough.
Well, they'll talk about the border, which has been used since for decades now as a problem, but now it's anyway. I digress. Point is the Hunter Biden issue just will not go away.
The U.S. Postal Service is down $6.5 billion this year. The service had hoped for a financial turnaround. They predicted they would actually break even in the fiscal year ending September 30th, but that didn't happen. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy blamed it on inflation, upping operation costs, and skyrocketing printing prices as well.
Still can't believe Louis DeJoy is the Postmaster General. I'll have to ask Rothmann. I would have thought Rothmann would have done something about that by now. I'm a little disappointed with him.
Who's responsible?
Yeah.
United Health Group is getting sued. The healthcare and insurance company is accused of using faulty artificial intelligence algorithms to wrongly deny coverage for Medicaid patients who need rehab after being hospitalized. The lead plaintiffs are the families of 2 patients who need long-term care in post-acute facilities, and again, denied because of the AI algorithm. In San Francisco today, a 4-hour meeting is set to take place between President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. President Biden looking to stabilize ties with China. The 2 leaders expected to discuss the wars in Gaza and Ukraine as well.
China is I want to talk about this tomorrow a little bit, but China is a fascinating country right now for America to have this delicate relationship with. And I spoke a little bit about this the other day, but, we see China as this hugely powerful nation, which it is. But within that power, just as it is in America, there are soft spots. And the 2 nations need each other. So even as China is an adversary to America, they both, America and China, have to find a way to do business because we're their best customer. And they are a critical link for us on so many different issues. So, and they're not the completely powerful, without problems country that they might be made out to be, even militarily. I mean, they have limitations and issues within China as well. I mean, and big issues. I'm talking about economic issues, et cetera. So, there's a lot of tension right now between U.S. and China, and the rhetoric, I think, is dangerous. But that said, I think both countries know, and representatives of both know, they need each other.
Let's talk Google for a moment. Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai says Google pays Apple 36% of Safari search revenue. An expert witness testifying on Google's behalf during antitrust proceedings inadvertently revealed the figure yesterday. Pichai confirming the information while testifying in a separate lawsuit filed against Google by Epic Games. 36%. That's a lot. And
this is what we talked about yesterday with Jefferson Graham.
Yeah.
About that relationship between Google and Apple. Go ahead, sorry.
Lastly, a new Royal Caribbean cruise, because I know you're a big fan of cruises. Can't wait to get out there on the boat.
Oh, my God.
A new Royal Caribbean cruise will set sail next year for just only Taylor Swift fans. It's a Swiftie boat. A Disney travel agency called Marvelous Mouse Travels is organizing the In My Cruise Era, a cruise that will bring Swifties together on a Royal Caribbean international ship. The agency's website says the 4-night cruise to the Bahamas will set sail next October after Taylor Swift's last concert in Miami and will celebrate all things Taylor. The pop star herself is not affiliated with the cruise, is not expected to be on the boat or appear at any events on the boat, but it's a Swiftie cruise. So.
Yeah, but everybody loves Taylor and they love listening to her music. That's probably a great thing. That'll probably be a great experience for those people. And parents everywhere are going to have to figure out, your parents of teenagers, whether they can pull the magic beans together to pay for it. And then, of course, be chaperones, I would just say that I've been on those specialty cruises. I was on the Turner Classic Movies cruise. So if you're a fan of classic movies, it was great. I mean, they had movies playing in all the theaters all day, all night. Sure. And then they had special Q&A, and they had people who were stars or related to the movies there. And you got to talk movies with all of these different people who were on board the cruise. In this case, it'll be Taylor Swift. They'll probably have, lip syncing contests with Taylor's, that's what I would do.
Taylor Swift dance parties.
Yeah. I think it sounds like fun.
Well, it's smart of them to do it in Miami right after her last concert. right? Because then everyone's already there and that's where the cruise takes off. Because for a lot of people wanting to take a cruise to the Bahamas, you have to fly across the country in order to do it. Well, if
Oh,
you're
sure,
already
sure.
there for the concert, you might as well just hop aboard a boat and go.
And here it is. Katie says, one of these days I'll have to listen to something from Taylor Swift. Rick Springfield has a cruise. Judy says Rick Springfield does a
Really?
cruise every year for his fans.
Oh, that's
Or he
fun.
used to, she says. I think he discontinued it during the pandemic. Yeah, I mean, if everybody's there for the same reason, it's pretty great. You know, and it can be anything pop culture. There are archaeological cruises. We were going to go on a National Geographic cruise. So anyway, bravo.
National Geographic cruise. That's kind of up my alley. We're boring old people now.
Yeah.
Well, this report is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore, and boy, do they have choices. 28 varietals on that tasting room menu. They've got 14 reds and 14 whites, including the Mark Thompson Why Are You Yelling Red?
Sure.
And
Why are you yelling?
Hey, which one of you is Mark Thompson Pinot Grigio?
Yeah.
So
Hey,
good.
which one of you is Mark Thompson?
Right.
Makes a perfect holiday gift. Thank you for supporting our sponsors. Please call them. You could say, smash it with your iron rod,
Sure.
and you get the 10% off of anything there.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Right.
And that's simply for saying that and being a Mark Thompson Show listener. You get the exclusive discount. And you can call Rich at 925-699-4576 to make it happen.
Wow.
I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, I like a little. We're gonna get right to him. You know, I don't want to linger too long. I like to get right to my Rothmann when he's in the green room. You know him. He's an author. He's a lecturer. He's a longtime KGO talk show host. Continues to be an educator. And when it comes to presidential history and government, this sort of thing, he is just top of the heap. He's John Rothmann, everyone. Hi, John.
Good morning, Mark.
John, I'm going to park the Middle East stuff for a moment to first talk about the situation in Congress. It looks as though, I thought that this might not happen, but it looks as though the government will stay open. They cobbled together a compromise, and I guess they had to bring Democrats in to make it happen, right?
They sure did, and some of the people on the right of the Republican Party are unhappy, but it appears that the Speaker has scored a victory, which I must tell you was more or less the same thing when you boil it all down to what Kevin McCarthy wanted. The problem was Kevin McCarthy had burned so many bridges that he just couldn't succeed. So Speaker Johnson has achieved something very significant.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you point that out because there is a part of this, and we lose track, I think, often in the headlines and the stories and the news cycle. There is an aspect of this when it comes to legislating that is about brokering compromise and relationships. And that's what happens on Capitol Hill as well. So as you say, John, once you've burned sufficiently bridges in numbers that, you know, just leave you kind of out there too much, you can't really broker a compromise because there's nobody to compromise with anymore.
No, you're absolutely right. You know, I'm reminded, I know you're going to do an interview about Julia and Ulysses S. Grant. Grant, when he was courting her, took her across a flooded area and said, now just hold on. And then she said, well, I intend to cling to you for the rest of my life. And I can only tell you, if the conservative Republicans would follow the advice of Ulysses S. Grant and cling to each other for the rest of their lives, they might succeed. But fortunately for those who are Democrats, they are so fractious that it just doesn't work.
It's so true. Fractious is a ding word. The deal is that it used to be, wasn't it the adage, John? Democrats fall in love because Democrats, we're all over the place is the idea. And Republicans fall in line, the idea being that we as Republicans, we decide on something and we are just like everybody closes ranks behind Trump, you know. Now it seems not so much that adage, you know, that the GOP is it's as balkanized as the Democrats.
Yeah, but that's always been true with the Goldwater Rockefeller battles, the Reagan Ford battles. I mean, part of politics is being fractious, and it makes for a lot of fun.
Several Senate Republicans have made a public show of grousing about Tommy Tuberville's blanket holds on military nominations.
Yeah.
They are looking for ways around Tuberville, right? And essentially, I mean, you've got Pentagon officials and, I mean, top Pentagon officials speaking openly about the fact that America's security has been compromised, the defense of America, by this guy Tuberville, who single-handedly is holding up these promotions in various commissions. Can you speak to their workaround on Tuberville?
Well, they can do it very easily, but what they really ought to do is change the Senate rules. What the senator is doing is unconscionable. It hurts national security. Everyone knows it. The Republicans are reluctant to isolate him because they need his vote. So, I mean, it's just that simple. But if they want to change the rules of the Senate, they can, and they have in the past. That's what the whole business about cloture was when they upped the cloture thing. So, there's
the
no
Senate
excuse.
can do whatever they want, right? I mean, the Senate is really, it's bizarre. Can you give me just a few seconds on that? They literally can change whatever rules they want in the Senate.
That is correct. Both the Senate and the House, their rules are designed by them for their purposes, and so they can do anything they choose. But when you have a narrow majority or a narrow minority, and you want to cobble together a majority, you don't want to alienate somebody who appears to be a fixture, at least for the time being, by the Republicans of Alabama, and that's Tuberville in the United States Senate.
You know, I want to ask you about this because it came up in Kim's news, and I think it's occasionally it comes up here, worth a mention and a thought or two. The U.S. Postal Service is run by this guy, Louis DeJoy. He's
just disgraceful.
Yes, exactly. He was a Trump appointment, big Trumpy. And again, I'm not, there's not, if he were competent or whatever, it would be fine.
No, he's partisan. I don't know if he's competent or not, but he's partisan. Remember the whole thing over voting machines. I mean, and the tabulation of votes and having them tabulated. And he eliminated the machines from the post office department. I mean, the man is just a disgrace. But it's not like the old days when the Postmaster General was appointed and confirmed by the Senate. In those days, the Postmaster General served in the president's cabinet. That's no longer the case. It's now a private corporation for all intents and purposes, public-private mixture. So the appointment has a timed appointment, and the Democrats don't have the votes to remove him, so he'll just stay there till his term expires.
Right. John says it so perfectly. It just, you're stuck with him. I get in the chat occasionally, I get how come the Democrats don't replace Louis DeJoy, and it's just that the votes aren't there. So there's a 10-year plan that's supposed to make the U.S. Postal Service solvent and eventually turn a profit. But in the last fiscal year, they report a loss of $6.5 billion. And again, this Louis DeJoy, who is riding herd over this, I believe, wants to privatize.
Of course he does.
Yeah.
He said it. He has no business being in the job he's in. And eventually he will be replaced. The hope is that the Democrats will still control the appointment power, and the president will be able to work his magic.
Mail volume across the U.S. declined almost 9%. Number of mailed items falling to about 116 billion compared to 127 billion the previous years.
We have email now, and we have Facebook now, and we have all the other vehicles that we can use. Have you ever figured out how much it is to send a first-class mail today? Do you know?
No, what I know that they've raised it twice.
There, I rest my case. I rest my case.
I just buy the stamps and put it on there. How much is it, John?
I have no idea. Are you kidding? They keep raising it.
Come on.
Google it.
Come on. Kim, how much is it to send a first-class letter? Somebody in the chat will know.
Yeah, somebody will tell us. And they'll
somebody
get a
will tell
farmer.
us.
I just bought, by the way, about 300 first-class stamps.
Right. I just buy them by the roll. I don't know exactly what they are. Right.
The reason why I bought them is we send out our holiday cards.
Sure, of course.
But they keep raising it. So one day it's one price, and then a week later they raise it a little bit. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, this is and critics of DeJoy are saying that postage rate hikes are one of the reasons for the decline in volume of, as I was saying, of stuff that's being mailed. And these are unprecedented postage increases. Twice annual above inflation postage hikes are worsening the USPS. And that's according to Kevin Yoder, who's a congressman from Kansas.
Yeah, what kind of mail do you get these days? I can tell you, most of the mail I receive is junk mail.
Sure, but junk mail.
How much is a stamp now?
But junk mail is revenue. It's real. That even though they pay a discount, how much is it, Kim?
It is 66 cents to send a standard size rectangular envelope.
Yeah, I love it. Very nicely done.
Just to show you, Kim, when I went, because Ellen sent me to the post office to buy the stamps for our holiday cards.
Yes.
I didn't even ask how much they were. I just paid for them.
Yeah, that's it. You get the forever stamps. Blue Spark says USPS faster and cheaper than UPS, FedEx, etc. So the postal service still faster and cheaper, definitely cheaper. But the attempt to privatize the USPS, which is exactly what we were just talking about, that is to ultimately screw you as a consumer, because the minute that private industry takes over completely, it'll cost you a fortune to send stuff. And
it already costs a fortune. 66 cents. Can you imagine?
Can you imagine the horror? And then finally,
I remember when a first-class stamp was 3 cents. I remember when there was an airmail stamp that you bought separately that I think was 6 cents. But of course, that is back when dinosaurs walked, or should I say, buffalo were in the plains.
They just strapped the mail to the dinosaurs. Is that what they did, John?
I know. It's crazy.
So inflation in the U.S., and then I'll get to the Middle East. Inflation in the U.S. is improving, but it's odd, or is it, John, that the public mood has not really reflected some kind of relief in the way of inflation and prices. I think it's because of price of gas and price of food.
No, I agree. And also remember, if you repeat something often enough, which is what the Republicans do, then inflation becomes an issue, even though we're not technically in an inflation situation. But of course, everything costs more. I just heard the thing, and Kim can look it up, how much a Thanksgiving dinner costs this year compared to last year. And this is just part of the increasing concern we should have as a nation with costs. But frankly, Joe Biden deserves a lot of credit. The Democrats deserve a lot of credit. The Republicans said we were going to have this massive inflation, which we have not had.
Well, this is the point. And I guess what I'm getting to with you is, and I'll just give you a couple of specifics, and then I want really your thoughts, is strategically, how do the Democrats communicate this message? But look at this. Gasoline prices are actually about 10% lower than they were a year ago. And the average cost of much of what goes into a shopping cart has been roughly unchanged for a year. So it's not true that inflation continues to rise.
Don't confuse people with the facts.
Yeah, Joe Biden or the Federal Reserve are out of step with public opinion, which, as you've suggested, is still taking in that, oh no, inflation is bad, inflation is bad. So there's a certain pessimism in the public. So tell me how that message can be better communicated. I mean, is there a communication strategy that should be employed such that, this word gets out?
Ronald Reagan was a great communicator. Joe Biden is not. But I'll tell you, they have a big advantage. And that is whenever Donald Trump speaks about vermin and camps to round people up and massive deportation, or, as we learned in the last election, the question of a woman's right to choose, I have to tell you the Republicans are on the wrong side. And I believe the economy is relatively stable. That is to say, I wish it were stronger. But really, things seem to be going well. The market is up.
Well, the market is up, and in relation to the inflation question, which kind of began this conversation, because inflation has stabilized, they'll likely lower that prime rate, which will be good for the economy as well. I mean, I will tell you, in the developed world, America probably has one of the leading economies right now. I'm talking about
the backbone of the world's economy.
The health of this specific economy is better than that which you'll find through most of the developed world. So it's odd, again, juxtapose that and put it alongside Biden's disapproval rating, which is up to 56%, and you've got yourself this kind of weird cognitive dissonance.
No, if you listen to Fox, we are in an inflationary period. Everything costs more. Don't confuse them with the facts. And remember that half the country gets their information from those who are opposed to Joe Biden without any question. So it's It's really a matter of communication. And the Biden campaign will have to deal with how they communicate these questions.
Record unemployment. I mean, record, employment. You've got a record low unemployment
Of course,
numbers.
but don't confuse people with that, Mark.
Yeah.
You know, what are you, a subversive?
So that's what's happening with the nation's economy. Nonetheless, this is a very scary time in the world. You have a situation in the Middle East, and the humanitarian crisis that's emerged in Gaza as a result of the Israelis striking back after the atrocities of Hamas on October 7th. Now that not only dictates the narrative, but you can see how easily with southern Lebanon and with Iran linkage to all of these various terrorist groups, with the Houthi rebels firing on various positions
On
with
a
bombs.
lot. They fired them toward a lot.
On Israel. Okay, so you see how this could easily grow into a wider conflagration. But even if it doesn't, major crisis in the Middle East. Give me a few thoughts on this.
I'll do it very quickly. First of all, we now know the Israelis were correct that the Hamas has used hospitals with underground vaults to be their command and control centers. No question anymore. The Israelis are fully justified in doing what they're doing. It is not Israel's fault. It is Hamas. And everybody has to understand that. Doesn't mean that you excuse the fact that people are dying. The Israelis have made every effort. They've sent incubators in. They've sent supplies in. People are afraid to go out and pick them up because Hamas doesn't want them picked up. And so there is it's a question of how you deal with a terrorist organization. Let me be crystal clear, though, that the Israelis understand the public relations problem, but they're not going to stop doing what they're doing. Now, there may be a deal now for the release of some hostages. Remember, the Israelis wanted all the hostages released. There is no reason why they shouldn't all be released. And so it's a very serious problem. Hamas remains committed to Israel's destruction. Now, I did talk to a very knowledgeable Lebanese citizen who said to me Nasrallah is not going to attack, that he understands that if he does, the Israelis will obliterate him, as they have said they would do, and that would destroy Nasrallah's political base and his arms arsenal. So the Israelis, we hope, and I say this very sincerely, are doing the right thing in terms of rooting out Hamas and in terms of trying to solve the problem of Nasrallah in Lebanon. It's not Lebanon, by the way. It is Nasrallah who has a foothold in Lebanon. Let me go a step further because everyone talks about what's the end game. And I had a long discussion with someone for whom I have a high regard, who is in favor of a two-state solution. And I said, you want a two-state solution today? He said, oh, yes. I said, well, stop and think for a minute. If there were a two-state solution, if the West Bank were controlled by the Palestinian Authority, you and I know if there were free elections, Hamas would win. And Israel is not going to allow a Hamas-controlled state 9 miles from the sea. They're just not going to allow that to happen. In order for there to be a change here, the Palestinians themselves have to choose a leadership that will affirm Israel's right to exist and a willingness to have a two-state solution. All the polls have indicated up to the attack of October 7th that Israelis are willing to go along with a two-state solution. Palestinians have rights, but not at the expense of Israel's right to exist. And Hamas remains determined to destroy Israel. And so the Israelis really have no one with whom to communicate. There's no possibility. It's a serious conundrum. And let me say a word about the United Nations, because the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, continually calls for a two-state solution. But it took him forever to even say anything about Hamas. And more than that, neither the General Assembly nor the Security Council have condemned Hamas for the atrocities of October 7th.
That is particularly odd. That really is.
No, it's not odd. It's consistent. That's the whole point, that anything Israel does is wrong. That is the view of the United Nations. It has been for years and years and years. But as somebody who has been an advocate for the United Nations, I've emceed more events on the anniversary of UN celebrations. And frankly, I worked for Harold Stassen, who wrote essentially the Charter of the United Nations. This is a sad day because you don't want to have an international body that is so impotent as the UN has become.
Well, didn't the UN establish Israel as a state?
They partitioned Palestine in the resolution of 1947 into two states, one Arab, one Jewish. And the Jews accepted the partition, and the Arabs said they would never accept it. And that is the problem. And so when on November the 29th, 1947, Palestine was partitioned, there was an acceptance by Israel, but not by the Arab Palestinians. And that you read in my book, Icon of Evil, that whole discussion. But people don't remember history. Let me give you one other example. You know that Egypt controlled Gaza from 1948 until 1957. There was a war in 56. The Israelis took Gaza. They withdrew with guarantees from the United Nations and the world that they would be safe. They left, Egypt took over, and of course in 1967 it was again used as a base. And so Israel took Gaza. And what did Ariel Sharon say? He was prime minister of Israel. And remember, Sharon was like a bull who carried with him his own china shop. Sharon withdrew unilaterally from Gaza. And he said, we give you Gaza. Go ahead, develop it. Develop a port, develop an airport, we'll help you with everything. They offered everything. And of course, you know that the Palestinian Authority lost control to Hamas. Hamas won the election. And we now have the resulting situation. So when Benjamin Netanyahu and the unity government in Israel says they're not going to withdraw from Gaza and just leave it to terrorists, they're absolutely right. The Palestinian people themselves have to organize themselves, accept unconditionally Israel's right to exist, and enter into talks. If they do that, there is a chance. But without that, and you know, I should reflect yesterday, why did over 300,000 Jews and non-Jews gather in Washington, D.C. to protest for Israel? Because they're not only concerned about Israel, they're concerned about Jews in the United States. I watched CNN's special last Sunday about the rise of Jew hatred in this country. I was horrified, terrified, not surprised because I read the newspapers. But this is a serious, serious question. It is not just what's happening in Israel. It's what's happening in the United States. It's what's happening in Europe. And these are things that we are going to have to deal with. May I say, Mark, and then I know you want to move on, Jews are not going to roll over. They're not going to allow the world to ignore what has happened. And I regret to say that from Canada with Trudeau or from France with Macron, and it's just been appalling. The comments they've made have been very destructive and does not inspire confidence in anyone.
Well, the conversations that are being had at universities, and there are a lot of conversations that I'd suggest are scary, because when you identifying Jewish students barred from entering the event, which was a Gaza Under Siege event. This is at Yale. There was a bus, I guess, that was supposed to pick up those who were headed to Washington from Detroit to attend a rally in support of Israel in Washington, and the bus wouldn't pick them up because they were Jews. I mean, this is and again, I'm just getting this from various people. I
could give you chapter and verse, line after line. And the interesting thing yesterday at the rally was it was a rally in support of Israel, but more than that, it was a statement about Jew hatred, which is what it is. And if you take a look at Tulane University, or you take a look at, I talked to somebody yesterday from the University of Pennsylvania, this is becoming a pervasive problem. Somebody asked me whether I favor banning these groups, and my answer is no. I want them to speak. I want people to hear what's happening. I want people to understand why Jews and non-Jews are so disturbed by this rise in Jew hatred. It is something we are all going to have to contend with. And may I say, I want to go back to Trump.
All right.
When Trump talks about vermin, when he talks about concentration camps, when he talks about mass deportation, what do you think that conjures up in the minds of Jews, and I hope non-Jews? This is the language, and I say it very bluntly, that was used by Hitler,
sure,
and by Mussolini. And people need to understand no one is calling Trump a Hitler or a Mussolini, but the fact that he would employ that kind of language, and may I tell you, the deafening silence from Republicans. Ronna Romney McDaniel was asked to condemn that language. And you know what she said? She said, well, I don't want to mix into campaign rhetoric and so forth. I remember, because I was at the Cow Palace in 1964, when George Romney, Ronnie McDaniel's grandfather, stood before the convention and denounced extremism, called for civil rights. If George Romney, who I knew very well, were alive today, he'd be rolling over in his grave that his granddaughter, the chair of the Republican National Committee, would not disavow, condemn what was said. And by the way, if I were still a Republican and I were a member of the Republican National Committee, there sure as hell would have been a resolution to condemn Trump for what he said. It ought to be a disqualifier running for president of the United States.
Well, they would throw you out. I mean, you wouldn't, but you couldn't get that
All right,
resolution
it's
off
not
the
the only
off the
place I've
launch
been
pad.
thrown out of.
Yeah. Look, I would also suggest this, just from my perspective. I think that there is sadly, a momentum to the rhetoric. And so, for example, even in our chat, I see, what's going on in Gaza is a genocide. What's going on in Gaza is a humanitarian horror. But again, provoked by the initial Hamas attack. Now you can say, well, but that was against the backdrop of, this open-air prison, which is Gaza. It's a horrible place. As I've always said about the Middle East, it depends on when you walk into this movie. And there are a lot of people who've just walked in, and I get it, but calling it a genocide is not fair. If the Israelis really wanted to kill everybody in Gaza, they could.
Yeah,
their genocide could have been perpetrated long ago. So I really... but that's the kind of rhetoric, John, that whips up this sort of reaction and response.
Mark, genocide is mass murder. It's what was done to the Jews and the gypsies and people who were gay by the Nazis during the Holocaust. It was mass murder. There was no question about it. And what is happening now is not genocide, nor is it apartheid. I'll tell you what apartheid is. You know what apartheid is. It's crazy, the terms, but I'm going to tell you what scared me the most. There was a campus that issued a statement condemning 75 years of Israeli occupation. Wait a minute. Let's do a little math. What is 75 years? That's 1948. What that expression has been and continues to be is that Israel has no right to exist as a nation. That's what's so horrifying to me.
Well, that's a classic example of what I'm talking about. The rhetoric outpaces the facts. So you say 75 years of occupation, somebody builds a banner, they get a parade, and on a Yale campus, all of a sudden, people begin this and uncork this anti-Semitism. It's really scary. I'm not saying that you can't have a real conversation about a two-state solution and all the rest. I mean, that conversation has been going on for some time now, and sadly, Netanyahu and his government and the extremists in the Israeli population, I'm talking about the super religious Jews, they haven't helped. So
with all due respect,
yeah,
I really mean this. This is not Netanyahu's problem. It is the problem of the Palestinians. Netanyahu, despite his concerns, has upheld the basic tenets of Oslo and the peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan and the Abraham Accords.
John, but Netanyahu has been militant about expansion on the West Bank. And come on. I mean, Netanyahu has been not a real broker for any kind of legit two-state solution.
I refuse, Mark, to allow Netanyahu to be blamed for the situation we're in today.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying within it.
The same thing happened, may I point out to you, the same thing happened when you had a labor government or when you had Ehud Barak as prime minister. It doesn't matter left or right. You can't think of it in those terms. Any government of Israel is prepared to make a deal, but you can't make a deal with people who don't want a compromise. So I do not accept the premise that this is the fault of Benjamin Netanyahu. This is the fault of Hamas. This is what Hamas did. There was a truce, I want to remind you, in Gaza, which was observed by the Netanyahu government and all the governments preceding. The people who broke the truce was Hamas. So
The deliberate atrocities of Hamas, the slaughter, the beheadings, these atrocities, the taking of hostages, of babies, of children,
and that has nothing
elderly.
to do with Netanyahu.
I agree. I agree. It's designed, though, for just what's happened to produce this kind of.
If Yitzhak Rabin or Shimon Peres were prime minister, the same response would have been: the Israelis will not allow Jews to be killed, nor will they allow a fiction to exist. May I ask you, can Kim find any statement by Mahmoud Abbas, who is considered the moderate Palestinian, objecting, condemning Hamas? You won't find it.
Well,
so you
speaking of Abbas, do you think that some propping up or reinvigoration, or however you want to term it, of the Palestinian Authority might then give some group agency for a conversation? I mean, you can't, as you said, you can't talk to Hamas.
Who's going to remove Abbas? And I want to point out that if Israel withdrew completely from the West Bank and Abbas had a state, you know what would have happened? The same thing that happened in Gaza. Hamas won the election. The Palestinian Authority was eliminated. The same thing would happen on the West Bank. The same thing will happen because Hamas has an iron grip. I wish it weren't true. I believe that the Palestinians have to reorganize themselves, but this is not Israel's fault. Israel is reacting defensively in an offensive faction because they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice. When you have an enemy who says they're going to kill you and who have demonstrated time after time that willingness, I don't know, but let me just quickly, because I know your time is short and you have to talk about Ulysses S. Grant and his beloved Julia.
Yeah.
I just want to say very clearly, it is the reaction in this country and in Europe blaming Jews. Let me tell you, when you travel abroad, the Donald Trump was objected to by many, but nobody said because of Donald Trump that America should cease to exist. And I think that is the point. It is not this government of Israel that is at fault or in any way. This is the Palestinian national movement reflected in Hamas that says and has said and continues to say that Israel has no right to exist.
Well, I'll just say this, John, in fairness, there are the members, I'm sure, the Palestinian national movement, as you said it, that deplore what the atrocities of
Where
Hamas.
are they? Well, find me a statement.
Those speeches or that speech is being drowned out by the militancy.
No, find me a statement. I monitor this every day. I look for moderate Palestinians. They either are silent because they agree, or they're silent because they're afraid of being killed by Hamas. It's
John,
one or the other.
I will speak to you again next week. I pray fervently for peace of some kind, and sadly, and this is true, by the way. I mean, it really is true. You're dealing with Hamas that has embedded themselves in the civilian population. That really is their strategy.
And they really do have under hospitals.
Right. It really is true that their nerve center is under the damn hospital.
I have a homework assignment for you. You find me a public, moderate Palestinian statement by a leading Palestinian authority condemning what happened, and I'll be happy to listen to it. But I can tell you, because I've looked for it, I haven't found it. So that's your homework assignment.
All right.
I think it's really important, because if there are such Palestinians willing to speak out, we need to encourage them, develop them, and grow them.
Let's talk to the professor next week. How about it for the great John Rothmann? Thank you, John. Thank you for a tough conversation, but we appreciate you having it with us.
Mark Thompson Show.
It's not easy. It is not easy. The world is a complicated place, and probably no more complicated place than you'll find at the, I don't know what's happened. Oh, is this locked in? What's locked in? Why do I keep hearing applause?
Well, I think
is it because I'm so special?
Clapping for you. I mean, I think they're, yeah.
I don't know.
The people are going crazy.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, it got stuck on the right thing.
Yes, it did.
I'm really glad.
Tell your little friends the dreams do come true.
Yeah, how about that?
Better than getting stuck on the booze.
Why does that applause follow Mark Thompson everywhere he goes? I don't know.
He turns the corner.
I love it. I love it. I've told you.
They do this to me all the time. I don't know.
I
what
wish
the hell
they would
it
do
for.
that to me all the time.
He walks into the bathroom and
Yeah.
there
I've
it goes
always felt
again.
that all of us would be better off, and this is from someone who has done a lot of that announced, the ladies and gentlemen, please welcome
Right.
Academy Award winner, Al Pacino. I've done a lot of those things for the award shows, and I always feel like all of us would benefit from that kind of introduction when we entered a room, like, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome outstanding news person Kim McAllister. Just, or whatever. Daughter of Kim McAllister, Julia. I just feel as though we'd all benefit from that. So
That's back in the olden times. Didn't they used to, if you walked into the castle anywhere near the king, you would be introduced like that?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. We
the
need to get back to the.
announcing, yeah.
We gotta, get back to those olden times.
I like that.
Yeah. All right. So here's what's happening, everyone.
Oh my God.
All right. I know it's exciting. I've got Kim's news upcoming, and then I have a legit author joining us who's written an intriguing book. It's a historical novel about Ulysses S. Grant, the general, and Julia, his love. It's there are a couple of things going on. One is, I think, learning about Ulysses S. Grant, and also learning about his relationship with Julia Dent. They met through her older brother, who was a West Point classmate. And we'll get into that conversation. But what's cool is that there's an entire novel that's been built around that relationship by author John Cinch. So we'll talk to John coming up. I meant to ask Rothmann, and I didn't get into it with him because we got into the Middle East stuff, about this Manchin stuff. Joe Manchin, no surprise, quote, absolutely would consider a presidential run. Really? No kidding. I mean, everybody knew it, right? And, it's because Manchin has sort of positioned himself in between the two parties, even though I think he leans GOP. He's saying if he can, quote, reinvigorate the middle-of-the-road constituency, that would play a major role in whether he would launch a White House bid. So he did say this, which you will not hear on the GOP side. Quote, I'm totally, absolutely scared to death that Donald Trump would become president again. I think we will lose democracy as we know it if he wins. So, I mean, as he runs, I don't know, it would be third party, maybe. I mean, these independent candidacies, third-party candidacies, they're relevant, super relevant, because they can siphon off votes from the mainstream candidates, Republican and Democrat. But there's no real play to actually win. You become a spoiler, right? That's all that is. I doubt that does Manchin just want to be a spoiler? You're going to go to all that trouble to, run for president and just be a spoiler? But it's something to watch. So watch it we will. So when we come back, we'll talk about this new historical novel. I did want to mention one thing. This is not about the politics of the day. It's not about international relations or any of that stuff. It's about the labor movement and the deal made by the
Mark Thompson Show.
The Hollywood writers made that deal. They had the strike and they finally made the deal. And David Zaslav, who is the guy who runs Warner Brothers Discovery, he says that the demands that were made by striking writers were reasonable. But he says, can you let him finish?
Can you let him finish, sir?
Yeah, can you let him finish? He says now they're overpaid. So he admits that the writers were correct in their demands for sweeping changes in how they're compensated in Hollywood. But in a new profile with the New York Times, he says they're right about almost everything. And so what if we overpay? I've never regretted overpaying for great talent or a great asset. So he feels they are overpaid, but so what? Writers got an increase in pay. They got minimum show staffing requirements. Remember, they were talking about putting on those shows with just, almost skeleton crews of writers. Mm-hmm. And they got protections against artificial intelligence. But they pushed back, the studios did, on any number of these demands. And that led to this brutal strike. I mean, it was 148 days, brought the industry to a halt. And, of course, you had the after SAG strike alongside it. And the after SAG strike is over, but I'm seeing more and more, I don't know about you, Kim, in the membership of after SAG, and I've actually looked into booking a guest on this that we may do here in the next few days, that the after SAG rank and file actually has a problem with. They're not as, they're glad the strike's over, but they feel as though ultimately their leadership just wanted to end the strike, and maybe they didn't get some of the concessions they wanted.
Well, I saw Justine Bateman is saying, if you really like your job, don't vote for this contract.
Right. That's right. Justine Bateman, who was on Family Ties, and she was really a successful actress. I'm sure she never has to work again on one level. But she reinvented herself as, believe a computer scientist.
Yeah.
She's quite impressive. So when she says that the AI part of all of this is something that was left out of the final equation, it really matters. And what the deal says is, in cases where a performer's employer seeks to create a, quote, digital replica of the actor's voice or likeness with the intent of using the copy in their place, the employer must first obtain, quote, clear and conspicuous consent from the performer. So you have to get the performer's permission to use the replica. That's not the case right now. And the employer must pay the performer for the amount of days they would have been required to perform scenes featuring their digital likeness. No additional pay is required if the replica later replaces the actor in scenes they were already paid for performing in person. It's pretty eerie when you think about it, isn't it? If a digital replica of a background actor is used to portray a principal actor, the background actor must be compensated for the days that they would have worked in person, plus residuals for that.
And are they going to then try to pay you less than they would have? Maybe they'll just pay you union scale instead of paying you more than that because it's AI. And so you wouldn't have gotten what, if they wanted you specifically for that role, that they would have paid you more. I don't know. I just worry that people aren't going to get what they were going to get.
Well, Schedule F performers is what you're talking about, because those are the actors who get a higher salary threshold. They wouldn't get additional pay for use of their replicas. They're trying to get extra pay for performers who are working at scale, sort of what you've said, right? Those who are not getting the bigger money, like known stars, if you want to think of it that way.
Right.
They're working at day player minimum or weekly performer minimum rates, and that's what they're trying to do, is improve their world a little bit. So to make sure that they at least get compensated fairly for the replica use of their likeness, they've built these provisions into the contract. I feel as though the streaming bonus part of this is something that is an issue because you never really broke through on that. Here's the deal in the streaming bonus world, just to give you a little something, and I think it's easy to understand. Performers are going to be granted a streaming bonus in addition to residuals if their program is viewed by at least 20% of the streaming platform's domestic subscribers within 90 days of the release. So they release the product on Netflix or whatever it may be, and if 20% of the people with Netflix actually view it, then there'll be residuals that are granted. 25% of that bonus will go to a newly created streaming payment distribution fund. That's brand new. And that'll be used for streaming bonuses for additional performers. You also realize that that could be manipulated, right? If I say to you, hey, don't worry, Kim, once we hit 20% of the Mark Thompson show airing on whatever, we'll start to get residuals for it. You realize that, it's 90 days, but they can manipulate the numbers, right? They can put the Mark Thompson show lower in the algorithm. They can do a lot of things to hide whatever show is doing well. So they can even pull it off the platform, on day 89.
Yep.
So you realize that these are things that can be manipulated by the studios. I'm not sure. And I'm going to get somebody on here to talk about, the pros and cons. But I was just speaking to a pretty high-profile actor this morning back east who couldn't be on today. But I'd love to get somebody here the next few days. This is interesting. It's a moment for labor, but you also realize it's a moment for technology. And as the two fight over exactly how everyone should be compensated, it's tricky to know exactly, particularly when it comes to streamers, what the compensation package should be. So anyway, that's a word about that.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Let me ask you to support this show. Smash it.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Smash that thumbs up if you could. It helps us and it costs you nothing. I also wanted to recognize, if I can, Kim, early this morning, every time we get a new Patreon subscriber, I get a special notification. That's right. It's pretty cool. And every time we lose a subscriber, I get a notification. That's not as cool.
She loves me. She loves me
She
not.
loves me not. Let me find Bruce just became a new member for $10 a month. Big shout out. Come
Welcome
on,
aboard,
Bruce.
Bruce.
Bruce is very cool. He's my new favorite person.
That's awesome.
And you can find the Patreon and PayPal links at themarkthompsonshow.com. You just click Patreon or PayPal and you can become a monthly subscriber. Or one time, you toss us something for the holidays if you want on PayPal or whatever it may be. Whatever's easiest for you.
Ho, ho, ho.
But that was very cool. Ho, ho, ho. Deborah just edited her membership from $10 to $20 a month.
Big shout out.
Come on. That's
you,
Deborah.
Deborah.
I love Deborah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. In fact, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
To the new Patreon and PayPal members, or to those who have edited and increased their support of this show. We so desperately need it, and I have something for you. You need to do nothing but receive. Receive, receive, receive.
Receive the rod of equity and mercy.
Again, receive, receive.
Receive the rod of equity and mercy.
Yes. Receive, receive.
Receive the rod of equity and mercy.
Indeed. Very well.
I don't know how I feel about the new chant. I don't know about
yes.
that.
And how dare you?
The Mark Thompson Show.
I've got to get into my trance. I've got to get into my trance, Kim. How dare you in any way suggest that my trance isn't critical to the entire process?
Yeah, well.
No, good. You've always got a problem with something, Kim. You're really a rabble-rouser. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Kim's
Kim, how are
news is next, and then we will talk about Ulysses S. Grant and this new historical novel about Ulysses and his love. Do you know much about Ulysses S. Grant? I don't.
I think he was one of the good ones.
No, he was a general of the Union Army, right?
I think he was a good one of the good ones. I'll find out more here in just a few minutes.
Okay, that's great.
I didn't
Kim's
know his
news-
wife's name was Julia. My daughter's name is Julia. So
Hey, that-
right
oh,
away, I'm thinking I got to learn more about this.
You've got a vested interest in it. I love it. All right,
yeah.
Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this?
We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
Woohoo!
Right now, at this very moment in time, at the Filoli Mansion in Woodside, super fancy, President Biden is meeting with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping. So they spared no expense. They went down the
Nice.
peninsula. They went to the big mansion. It's all very upscale. And,
Someone sweep up the foliage out front. I don't think the
could.
president would like it.
According to people familiar with the whole planning of this, President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping will hold about 4 hours of in-depth talks on a range of global issues at Filoli Estate. Other events expected include a working lunch, a stroll on the estate, because they have beautiful gardens,
How
a
civilized.
smaller meeting with the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Secretary of State Antony Blinken as well. The estate, built in 1917, it features a Georgian mansion, acres of English Renaissance-style gardens. Security, of course, very high, and many roads surrounding the estate in Woodside are closed, but they're used to that there. You know, they
President
have
Xi, you've probably seen this mansion on TikTok, which you guys own.
TikTok. Yeah. And at one side of the streets are closed and they see a black limo rolling through. It's okay. They know. They're used to that.
President Xi, please don't touch that. It's from the 1700s.
In New Hampshire, the first in the nation presidential primary will be Tuesday, January 23rd of 2024. The Secretary of State announcing the date today. The state defying President Biden and the Democratic National Committee's plans to give South Carolina the party's first primary contest. New Hampshire says, it's ours. Oh, the fighting. It's the battle of the Congress people. Tennessee Republican Tim Burchett says he's moving on after accusing former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy of elbowing him in the kidneys yesterday. In an interview with CNN, Burchett called the incident a sad commentary on McCarthy's life. The Tennessee congressman is among 8 who voted to remove McCarthy as speaker.
Wow.
This is a word from the Lord, and he's not happy.
Yeah, the Lord is certainly not happy. Yeah.
No, the Lord doesn't like people being battered on the Capitol steps.
No,
okay?
I don't like that. Not a fight. Too much
try
fighting
to
for the Lord. I get it.
Yeah. City leaders
werewolf can kill a vampire. Did you know that?
Oh, I didn't realize if one of them was a werewolf, that's true. It could kill the other one. That's a very good point. Thank you.
Did you know you could kill a werewolf with a good elbow to the kidney?
Yeah, I guess that's how it starts.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, just a little, and you got it done. City leaders are asking commuters to take new routes as crews begin working on the 10 through Los Angeles. It's really hard for me to call it the 10 instead of Interstate 10.
That's a SoCal thing, right?
We're from the Bay Area. We don't do it like that, but I'll go SoCal for you guys. They're working on the 10.
Yeah, love it.
Cringe through Los Angeles. It shut down after an arson fire happened on Saturday. Los Angeles mayor assessing the damage on a helicopter flyover with the LA fire chief. Mayor Karen Bass says crews will work around the clock trying to shore up and repair the freeway deck and about 100 support columns. You can see some of those columns here in questionable shape. It's part of this part of the 10 handles 300,000 vehicles every day.
Every day.
Oh
my God.
Yeah, I know.
Where do they go? Well, Bass is directing the city's Department of Transportation to make commuter express buses free. She's requested adding white glove officers, traffic officers, in congested areas, and she's directing the fire chief to survey other freeway overpasses to assess vulnerabilities as well. There will be traffic updates from the mayor's office every morning this week.
It's brutal, and they're not really sure how long it's going to take to get that thing going. There was a pretty substantial breakthrough yesterday when they said two things. One, the structural integrity of this thing is essentially sound, so they'll only have to repair it, because they were looking at having to tear it down and rebuild it. I mean, that could have taken months, if not more than a year, because you have to, all kinds of environmental impact things, et cetera.
Right.
But now you just have to repair it. And they also said it was arson, as you say. So it's this thing is ongoing.
I read today 5 to 8 weeks is what I read for the reopening, or how long it will take to repair.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Oh my God.
Okay, well, it is a long time, but
Over at Target, the CEO says customers are grateful stores have started locking up certain merchandise. While discussing the retailer's third quarter earnings with reporters, the CEO, Brian Cornell, said shopper response to Target's decision to lock up items like toothpaste and deodorant has been positive. Really? Because it doesn't seem positive to me.
yeah, like, who did you talk to on that?
Speaking
I've
of
always wanted my toothpaste and deodorant under lock and key. Thank you.
I really would like to have to ask someone before I buy my toiletries off the shelf. Well, Target recently closed 9 stores in New York City, here in the Bay Area, Seattle, and Portland, citing violence and theft. So maybe that's why people are happy about it. CHP getting a raise here in California. That's right. Raises for CHP officers for the second year in a row. This one exceeding the raises Governor Gavin Newsom offered to other public employees, thanks to a state law granting them automatic pay increases. CHP officers will get a 7.9% wage increase, marking their biggest raise in 20 years. Last year, they got a 6.2% general salary increase. Both are historically high raises for CHP officers. They got to do something because law enforcement officers across the state were having a shortage. You want to attract them and you want to keep them, right? The first year of California's 2023-24 legislative session has lawmakers and the governor approving more than $10 billion in higher taxes and fees. That's so we can pay the CHP officers. The nonpartisan California Tax Foundation reports 17 new laws having taxes and fees will result in $10.42 billion in new costs to taxpayers. Congratulations. Soledad Unified School District denying claims now that a girl was strip searched at the middle school in this area. The social media post alleges a Main Street middle school student was forced to take her clothes off last week during a search of her belongings after it was reported she smelled of alcohol. The district says that's not the way it went down, and they followed all the rules. The report is sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee. Our thanks to them for sponsoring this report as part of the Mark Thompson Show. They have a holiday blend, and as a Mark Thompson Show listener, you do get the exclusive 10% discount. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Extraordinary coffees and teas. Check out the website, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. At checkout, you put in Mark T all together, and you get your 10% off.
And I'm telling you, this new holiday blend may be my favorite blend. I'm doing the French press for the last maybe 6 weeks, and it's spectacular. It really is. I think you'll really like it, so I recommend it. But definitely get the discount. Look, their coffee, it's all hand roasted, and they come from small farms. These are all, it's a sustainable kind of coffee farm that they deal with. And so, and because it's effectively organic, it's actually arguably better than organic for a lot of reasons. In fact, we're going to have one of the roast masters on, so you'll be able to hear how. But anyway, all that costs, and it's fresh. It's fresh cut. It's the first cut. So I mentioned that all because I want you to get the discount, so you don't quite pay top dollar for it. Get that 10% discount. Use Mark T at checkout. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com.
I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
I come from regular stock.
There's a reason that this place is fun. Don't ever use that word.
What are the porn stars doing, Mark?
They pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
What you say is the political dogma that they're trying to shove down our throats.
Straight up, right in, no problem.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
Cuatro años más.
I don't wear a mask for the same reason I don't wear underwear. Things gotta breathe.
Say what?
Do you have a secret talent?
You get nothing.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Did you really just do that?
Love having everybody in on a Wednesday, and I always love authors of historical pieces, and this is a delicious one. The General and Julia is a novel by John Clinch. Here it is. The John Clinch's novel getting insane reviews. I mean, really great. And who would have thought that we could, it's about the general in this title, The General and Julia, is General Ulysses S. Grant. Who would have thought we could get him here, but he's here. John Clinch, everybody.
My golly. Thanks for welcoming me, Mark.
Yes, sir. It's so cool to have you in the mix. And I must tell you, I was mentioning to everyone before, didn't really know much about Ulysses S. Grant, aside from the fact that he was, the general of the Union Army. He was twice elected to the presidency, right?
There, absolutely.
And so that kind of was it. And I always heard that he liked the sauce. I'd always heard that.
People have heard that. Apparently, there's some reconsidering of that. That there were people out there that his detractors may have helped spread that rumor. In any event, I chose to ignore that in this particular book. And I'm a novelist. I can do whatever the hell I want. Really.
Well, but yeah, it's a historical novel. So you do go into Civil War stuff and then how Grant and his wife met. So speak to some of that, because again, sadly, I think sometimes our knowledge base on this stuff is pretty shallow.
Basically what people seem to know about Ulysses Grant and his time is that he was a figure on the Civil War battlefield, sort of a silhouette. We see him as that grumpy portrait on a $50 bill. Some people remember him they remember the rumors of alcoholism. People see him with a big cigar. Those are the things that we think of. And when I read first, probably 6 or 7 years ago, Ron Chernow's big biography of him, the things I came away with weren't those things. The things that I came away with was the small stuff. And the small stuff was, to me, telling and big. And what I wanted to do was think about those small things. For example, at the tail end of his life, he had a year left. He didn't know it. It was something like a year left. It turned out to be pretty much exactly a year. When he was diagnosed with throat cancer, eventually he couldn't talk. He could barely move. He lost all of his money to a Ponzi scheme. This was 25 years before Charles Ponzi was born.
Before it was cool.
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. His son had gone into business with a fellow named Ferdinand Ward, who turned out to be a crook. And Ward took everything that belonged to Grant, everything that belonged to Grant's family. He broke down Wall Street, and Grant was left feeling terrible with nothing to leave his family. So racked by cancer, in terrible physical condition, he spent the last year of his life writing his memoirs so that he could leave something to his family. That's the part of Ulysses Grant that got me going.
Well, he clearly had his virtues strongly prominent in his mind as he led the Union Army. I mean, you even if you only knew that about him, he was on the right side of the Civil War, too.
He was on the right side. He was on the winning side. But there was something special about the way he carried that out. He was a person who, the more I think about him, the more I tried to reconstruct his mind at this great remove. He was a person with a kind of an open heart, a person who respected and loved a lot of people. And among those people that he respected was the Army of the Confederate States. When Lee finally surrendered to him, the agreement was essentially Grant and the U.S. government saying, go and sin no more. Just, you're free to go. You're Americans again. We're all happy, and we can go about our business. Whether that served us well or not, I don't know. Not for me to say. but it definitely suggests something about him that caused him, after the war, to be loved by both sides. Pretty unusual to be able to defeat an army and have a huge percentage of the people that army represented love you, but it happened.
Let me ask you now about his relationship with Julia, because your book is called The General and Julia. And again, this is a historical novel, so it's set against these real life events that you described. And I wonder if you could speak to how they met and also about her family. I think that's kind of interesting.
There's a great moment when they met. The opening scene of the book, it kind of had to be. I wanted to start with them getting to know each other. Ulysses was courting her. She was very young. And this more or less really happened. Just the chapter is called The Canary, and it's about the death of her canary. The canary dies. She's heartbroken. Her father doesn't really give a darn because of the kind of individual he turns out to be. And Ulysses, who is, as I said, courting her, builds a little tiny coffin for this thing and paints it yellow and buries it under a rose bush with her, complete with a funeral. So that says to me, and that more or less happened, and it suggested to me that there was something tender about him that we don't think about, something that we don't know. And in a sense, speaking of her father, he really stood as a counterpoint to her old man. Her father, she grew up in Missouri, lived in Missouri most of her life. Her father was a slaveholder, as opposed to her husband, who fought for the freeing of the slaves. So that puts Julia in kind of a position of a fulcrum between the North and the South, and I really love that. She proved to be a very, not only a useful character for me in that way, but of course the centerpiece of the book being the individual that he loved more than anything else.
If you have questions for John, please put them in the chat. But I did want to ask you a question myself about, because you touched on slavery, and that's sort of, I mean, to call it thorny is to understate it in the extreme, but the evolution of Grant's view towards slavery, I wonder if you could speak to that.
Huge part of the book. At the very beginning of the novel, we see him as he was. Now, he grew up in an abolitionist family. That's really not a part of the book, but he grew up with an abolitionist father, staunch abolitionist. And we see him at the beginning of the book working on Julia's father's farm, where he employs, I guess, about 36 slaves. And the slaves are present, and they are toiling as they would. Basically, at that point, he considers them not that much different from hired hands. He hasn't really considered thinking about them very much. He kind of he thinks if one of them were to go away, he'd replace them with a white man, just as well, that they're interchangeable. As time goes by, and he begins to see them not only as the root of the Civil War, but as a tool that by taking them away from the South, he might kind of break the back of the Southern Army and the Southern culture. He begins to kind of think about using them. And then he begins to feel guilty about how he used them, because he's using them sort of the way his father-in-law used them. And eventually in the novel, he comes around to a vision of reconciliation that kind of completes his course.
Does Grant feel as though that to which you referred in the beginning of our conversation, that the settlement he made with the Confederate Army was almost too generous, or in attitude, or in specifics?
We're beginning to see, this is kind of an interesting thing for me. We're beginning to see that he did struggle with that, and with his understanding of his relationship to the Black race at the time in his life. Now, there's a new book, in fact, coming out in a couple months with that, a new history book with that as its subject. And I just read about it about 2 days ago. And it was kind of a surprise to me, because I thought I made all this stuff up. I thought I had kind of guessed at it, based on everything that I knew about him, I thought, well, this must be what's going on in his brain to make him do and say these things. But it turns out that at least this historian, whose name escapes me right now, has drawn the same conclusion.
Well, it's just one of those things where, as I say, he was this prominent historical figure. I just think that this area that you've explored hasn't really been explored in certainly the pop culture of this country, but we've had just a one-dimensional view of General Grant and and all this time. And
I wanted to live with him. You know, I wanted to be right there with him during the good parts, the hard parts, and the impossible parts at the end. And really to do what I could to illuminate something about him that we really hadn't seen before.
Well, it seemed like there's a tender story within the overall profile of General Grant. Yeah. And lastly, I want to ask you, or maybe just second to lastly, let me ask you about his prowess as a general. Was he a brilliant military strategist?
He was an ace. He was the best. There's little question about it. And I think part of it, and the thing we forget about not only Grant, but about his opponents at the time, was that he was on the ground. He was not at home in Washington or Missouri or wherever, communicating with these people by telegraph. He was there. And if there's a lesson in leadership, I think, to be learned, it's that there's no substitute for being there, which is what he always was. And he never let his army or the other army forget that he was engaged just the way they were. That's a pretty good thing. That's leadership.
Yeah, and clearly it was critical to his victories. I mean, he had a real sense of what was going on the battlefield. Hey, John Clinch, Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens makes an appearance in your book.
He does. I've been kind of tied with Mark Twain for the last few years. My first novel was called Finn, and it's the dark secret history of the worst character I ever knew in American literature, Huckleberry Finn's father. It's saturated with blood and alcohol, which is one reason I didn't want to write about alcohol again with General Grant. But it turns out
Huckleberry Finn's dad was a bad dude, huh?
Oh, he was a terrible person. He was an alcoholic, a child abuser.
Abusive, yeah. Right.
At any rate, I remembered as time went by that Mark Twain had actually kind of saved General Grant's bacon toward the end of his life. Grant was desperately trying to finish this memoir. And Mark Twain, his friend, Samuel Clemens, found out that he had cut a bad deal with his publisher. And Twain, who was a bit of a cranky old individual, would have nothing of it. And he took the president himself under his wing and negotiated a publishing deal, published it himself. And the result was, frankly, that General Grant's memoir, was at that time the single best-selling book ever when it came out, and it saved his family. And I think, clearly Mark Twain, although he didn't change a word of it, was instrumental in making that happen.
Interesting. Kim, did you have something?
I have two questions. The first one has to do with a misconception that maybe President Grant was corrupt, when really maybe it was just that he was a little too naive in some respects. And then the second one is, I wondered if you could talk about the Native American on his staff.
Good question. His naivete, I think, forgive me, his naivete, I think, is important. Naivete may be too strong a word, but his open-heartedness may be a better word for it. He never thought ill of much of anyone, and he wasn't prepared to enter into a relationship with someone thinking ill of him or her. And it didn't serve him well every time. It did not serve him well. He, in fact, he was anything but crooked at any point. And the moment when Wall Street went under and he lost everything was kind of an interesting thing because his son was in business with this guy Ward, and Ward called the company Grant and Ward, and the sign was positioned outside their offices in such a way that it was possible to look at it and think that the guy who had an office upstairs, Ulysses Grant, was the Grant on the sign. So not so good, right?
Yeah.
And the other question about the Native American.
Yeah. And because in those days you would think that there would be a lot of prejudice and that you wouldn't have someone of a different race on your staff if you're the president.
Well, as we've kind of said, Grant had he was open-hearted toward people, and he was interested in this case actually, the fellow's name was Parker, and he was trained as a lawyer, and he was not. He tried to enlist in the Army, and he was forbidden to enlist because he was a Native American, and Grant got him in, and Grant got him commissioned, and Grant was responsible for his having been able to rise up through the ranks and actually help Grant write the terms of surrender at the end. So that's kind of a proud moment, don't you think?
Yeah,
He
it's a great
sold the only slave he ever owned. Is that right?
And in fact, he didn't own her. Jewel, it's kind of confusing. Jewel was Julia's slave, and she had been Julia's slave ever since they were both children. But she was actually owned by Julia's father. That became an issue as time went by, of course, as Julia traveled around the Civil War battlefields with her husband, with her slave in tow.
Yeah.
So that poses all kinds of questions too, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure does.
I mean, that one of the things about your novel is that it weaves in all these complications in Grant's life, while also shedding light on who this guy was, really. As you say, we just have this kind of vision of this dude, and it's been a one-dimensional vision. It's been
we do.
But boy, congratulations on great reviews. I mean, I'm just reading some of these reviews. It's unbelievable. So you're being widely praised by other New York Times best-selling authors and writers, and it's just it's a real kick to read such great reviews for this. The General and Julia. It's the latest from John Clinch. John, congratulations. Thanks for spending a few moments with us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Hopefully we got some people interested, and you'll get that Mark Thompson Show bump in book sales. Yes.
Well, as Stephen Colbert says, maybe we'll move some paper.
There. That's a good way to say it. John Clinch, everybody. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks for
having me. Love it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh, my God. I love that. Real historian, real writer. How about that? Finishing up strong.
I'm interested in that book. I think I have to buy it for my husband for Christmas.
Yeah, I think that's a winner. Really is.
Yeah.
Even while we were sitting here talking, I got a wait a minute. I got a bulletin. This is great. Yeah, it's a good bulletin though.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is on our Patreon page, which you can reach at themarkthompsonshow.com. You can reach Patreon or PayPal. Sadly, we have to shake you down occasionally for support. That's the only way we stay on the air. Amy just edited her membership from $5 a month to $10 a month. Come on. That's what I'm saying. Big shout out, Amy.
Big shout out.
Mm-hmm. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's really cool, Amy. Thank you. And then alongside that, Deborah, who I mentioned before, is a Patreon member who edited up her membership as well, I think from $10 to $20 a month. She says, I listen to you on KGO every morning and now listen to the replay. Always enjoy the shows and guests. Wonderful to be able to hear current perspectives and information. Thanks to you and Kim. Well,
Kim, how are you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Albert,
thank you.
And Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
Great work by all. I can't wait till some of those other people show up for work. So appreciate all you do. Thanks and happy Thanksgiving from Deborah on Patreon.
Deborah. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Deborah.
Big shout out,
Yeah.
Deborah. Very, very cool.
Nice.
I love it. Well, those are all the ways you can support us. We try to,
Yeah.
bring you shows that are relevant. I know that there are controversies, and you couldn't find a time more troubled and controversial, you wouldn't think. We have domestic controversies. We have the rise of what many would call a fascist faction within America. You have instability in the Middle East and international issues. You have an economy that some say is rallying, others say, I don't feel it yet. We try to get to all of that, and we try to get to moments of levity and entertainment. That is our charter. So big shout out to all of you who support us. Yeah. The After Party Live is next on
We'll
the
do it live.
Yeah.
I'll write it and we'll do it live.
And I want to give a big shout out to Pinky, $1 a day Pinky. What up,
Big
Pink?
shout out.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody who is here every day, we so appreciate. Spread the word, share it
I'm
across
Shadow
the
Stevens for the Mark Thompson
great
Show.
universe.
Bye-bye.
Share this show wherever you do your social media.
Bye-bye.
Until tomorrow, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.